As a young woman around your age, I imagined the possibility of serving my state and my country in the classroom and in elected office. Today, the reason I stand before you, having seen that dream come true, is because of leaders who inspired me and encouraged me along the way. And many of them were teachers. Having felt their impact, I decided to dedicate my career to helping young women step up and take the lead. I became a teacher and a girls basketball coach, and I even started a nonprofit called Lead Kentucky, which recruits women to become greater leaders in their community. In all of those roles, I told my students and players the same thing I heard from all my mentors. You can be and do more than you might think.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are so excited today to be joined by Allison Slone. She is a special education teacher here in the state of Kentucky and a member of the Kentucky Board of Education. We're going to be talking to Allison today about her career and her background in teaching and all of the great experience that she has. This is a recorded session of Best of Business Live, just due to, teachers are in high demand these days. So scheduling wise, we decided to record this one, but we are going to give you all an opportunity at the end to ask questions via email, and we will get those questions answered for you if you have any for us. So Allison, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here and taking time out of your schedule to talk with us. We really appreciate you being here and being able to answer our questions about your background in teaching and your career that you've grown over so many years. So thank you. Well, I want to start out, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You can share, personally, who lives in your house with you and kind of any fun interests that you have outside of work, and then we'll delve into the serious business of teaching.
Sure. I have two children. I have a daughter that is a freshman in college this year. I have a son who's in the 8th grade and had to do both are having to do virtual learning over the past year. So that's been interesting for all of us to be in the home teaching and learning together. My husband is the local president of the Rowan County Chamber of Commerce. So there's a connection there. We have 2 dogs and 1 really fat cat. So it's an interesting home for sure. Other than teaching, I'm an artist. So in my spare time, that's kind of my calming down, what I do to kind of take care of myself when, things get a little hectic and crazy. I like to paint and draw. Watercolors, acrylics, all of that stuff. And I really like painting things and using them for social justice and other things. So I sell prints and then donate the money to different organizations around the state. So I like to do good with what I'm doing as well. But other than that, teaching is my world, and everything in teacher leadership and students and whatever I can dive into to do better for our kiddos in the state. That's my world.
Awesome. Well, that is so cool. I had no idea about your artistic side. That's really exciting. I myself was an art major in college for 3 years until I joined the business world. So I kind of understand where you're coming from on that. So very cool. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about your background with us. And I wanted to talk to you today. Just how did you make the decision to become a teacher? Did you have any influences in your life that helped you choose that path, or how did you, as a young person, kind of go down that road?
For not wanting to sound like the same old story and cliche, but I always wanted to be a teacher. I can't remember a time that I didn't want to be a teacher. My stepmom was a teacher for 32 years. She taught 2nd grade. So I think that did have an influence on what I wanted to do. I think it was my senior year in high school. She and my dad got a little worried that maybe she'd had too strong of an influence. So they started like bringing home pharmacy packets and pamphlets and putting them around the house. And I was like, I'm not sure why you're doing this. It's like, I just want to make sure this is what you really want to do. So yeah, I've always wanted to be a teacher. I was that kid that had the stuffed animals and the baby dolls around a desk, and I was making up lessons and doing things with them. So and you're going to hear my dog barking, so I apologize, but the
okay.
UPS man just pulled up and the dog is going to let him know that he shouldn't be here. But I did. And when I got a little older, I loved going to my stepmom's classroom and designing bulletin boards and making copies, and anything I could do to be in the classroom was just exactly where I wanted to be. So yeah, I've always wanted to be a teacher and couldn't imagine myself doing anything else.
That's so cool. I love that. I love that story. If your stepmom, what does she say now that you've had this great career and have been so successful in your teaching time?
Goodness. They're just constantly saying, my dad and stepmom and my mom and stepdad and all my family are very proud of all that I've done and proud of my children and just that, the things that we've done to change some education in Kentucky and other avenues. I think sometimes they think I've gone a little too far and need to step back some because I tend to overdo. And my mom and stepdad and all that I've done and loves everything about education, stays involved. She's in her teacher group and she fights harder than some of us that are still in the classroom, I think sometimes.
That's awesome. It's great to have that support from your family, even as you are, further along in your career now. It's still important to have them backing you up. So, and I definitely can appreciate that stuffed animals in the playroom, teaching them. My daughter's 5 and she's learning to read, so she's got her stuffed animals in front of the chalkboard a lot these days. So, were there any other mentors that helped you choose it? I know you are in special education. So when you were in school, going through the teaching program, did you have mentors that kind of guided you in choosing special education, or how did you make that decision to specialize?
I really did not make that decision until I was a senior in high school. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but the special education part of it didn't show till then. And I got to work in our special education classroom at my high school my senior year. And that's when the love for those children just really blossomed. They're just so unique, and their learning differences was something that I was just so involved and wanted to know more about and how to help them because, I'd always been the student that made the straight A's, so I really didn't understand, why children were different. And so seeing that and diving into it just made me wanted to know more. And if anybody knows me, when I get my mindset on wanting to know more about something, then that's when things start changing in my world. So yeah, I really wanted to focus on that. And I'm glad I did, because it's been an absolute blessing to work with children like that. So that was where the point changed for me to go to specialize in special education. I also have a degree in regular ed, K-4, which is what my stepmom always taught. So that's where I had the most experience. But I got my first job at the middle school level. I thought I'll get my foot in the door and then I'll go back to my K-4 babies. And 21 years later, I finally went back to my K-4 babies. But I spent 21 years at the middle school level and absolutely love those kids. As far as mentors in my life, even in second grade, thank you. In second grade, I had a teacher that really took me in during the time of my parents' divorce. And she was just that loving, kind person. And I think that had a huge influence on me. Her name was Shirley Watley. She was an amazing just caretaker and teacher and just all around good person. When I got older in high school, I had several teachers that really blessed me with their experiences and their kindness and the way that they taught, and just really made me want to be better and do better as an educator myself when I finally went to college to dive into education. One was my art teacher and another was my language arts teacher, and both of them really inspired me. But it was my first principal that hired me that I think has probably been the most influential on my career as a teacher. She was just amazing. She knew what she was doing. She knew what was best for kids. She did not question us as teachers as long as she knew we were doing what was best for children. She always left notes with positive things on it for us. She was just so encouraging. And she knew first 5 years of my teaching, she kept coming to me and asking me if I would be the teacher for the kids with emotional behavior disorders the next year. And I wasn't even tenured. And I was like, do I have to take it or do I still have a job? And she would always say, oh, no, you still have a job. But she knew that was something I would be good at. And I wasn't quite experienced enough to feel like I would be. 10 years later, I dove into that world, and it was an absolute blessing. And those are the children that I really enjoy working with the most. So she knew that, and she saw that in me. So that was something that was really special. But she just passed away this past year during all this chaos. So that's, a memory that I have of her that I'll always cherish. It's okay. She was a blessing to a lot of people, a lot of children over the years.
Absolutely. That's a great story. And I know we all have those mentors that we, whether we recognize when we get older, from our childhood, or, maybe we're aware of it as we're growing up too. We have those special influences in our lives that really make a difference in our path that we choose. So that's really, really cool that you get to share that story. And I'm sure she's super proud of you as well. So what are some of the skills that you learned as a teacher that translated into your role with the Kentucky Board of Education? What are some of the skills that you're still trying to sharpen in your career today? I know you've been in the teaching and the education world for 21 years, but we're always lifelong learners is kind of what I like to say. So what are those things you still like to work on, and things you've learned over the years that have helped you become an expert in the field?
That's a great question. I always say I'm never too educated to learn. So same concept. Some of the skills I think were just being able to know my audience and know the people sitting in the room. And that was my students for many, many years before I stepped into teacher leadership world. And you had to understand that each person sitting in that classroom had their own individual needs. They had their own individual struggles. The world they came from at home was different from the kid sitting next to them. So you had to know what I consider to be your audience and learn to adapt to that. And then when we really started collaborating in the general education classroom, you had to learn how to adapt, because every teacher is different, just like every student is. So you had to be someone who was willing to walk into someone else's classroom and co-teach with someone who had their own style, their own uniqueness. And I think that is a skill that is something that you need when you start stepping out into teacher leadership and you start working with leaders across the state. Is you have to be able to work with lots of different people who don't always necessarily agree with you, whose style may be different than yours. But being able to work with those people and coming to a common ground to find what's best for students is a skill that I cherish having. And I hope that other people see that in me as well. I also think, I told someone earlier today, I said 10 years ago, if you told me, to get up and speak in front of a group of people or be on these shows and be interviewed and stuff, I wouldn't have been able to speak. My face would have turned every shade of red. But when you find something that you're passionate about, you can talk and you can do what you need to do, and it changes your world. And my son's dyslexia changed my world several years ago when we had to advocate for him. And that started me. And, I told someone earlier today, as leadership is working with legislators. So I had to, make those phone calls and emails and knock on doors and get my foot in there to be able to tell people that we've got to make things change. So learning how to advocate and how to speak up and use your voice, but do it appropriately, is different than just speaking up and yelling that something's wrong. And I try to teach other upcoming leaders in the teacher world the same thing, that there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way. And I'm not going to say I've done it the right way every single time, because we all learn, but we learn from our mistakes. So that's okay. Being able to sometimes make decisions that are not necessarily the decisions you would have made, but being able to agree with those at the end of the day and move on, and because we all have to come, to a common ground on stuff. I think that's been huge. It's all about compromise, and even in our classrooms, we have to compromise. And I teach my children that all the time, and my students, that you may want something one way, and as the teacher, I may want it another way, but sometimes we have to both agree to compromise in the middle, and so that the student learns. And I think that's true no matter where we go in life, but in, working with the state board, that, we sit around that table and we make decisions that really impact thousands of lives. So you have to be able to talk about it, work out the kinks, and then come to a decision at the end of the day that's best for everyone, and be able to do that proudly. So I'm glad to be able to work with a lot of people who are able to do that as well.
I just so admire the passion that's coming through and what you're saying, because it's truly, I think, for all of our leadership in the state, any educator, you guys are passionate about kids. And that's, as a parent personally, that's super important to me, to have the kids at the forefront of, the best decisions being made. So, and that's in every part of education, it's particularly true for some students who can't advocate for themselves also, that's a really special role to have. So I appreciate that answer. Okay, Allison, so teaching is a critically needed career in Kentucky. How can a student prepare to enter educational careers now? What skills would you recommend that future educators focus on learning?
Another excellent question. We are at a critical shortage of teachers all across the United States, but definitely here in Kentucky. And so we're really trying our best to recruit kiddos and trying to get them to see that it's an amazing career to have. Sometimes that's difficult, and I tell people all the time it's most difficult because there is no other career in the world where the future people in that career are sitting there watching people from the time that they're 7 years old until they're 18 years old. They're literally sitting in our classrooms watching us be the teacher that they hope to be someday. So, if they get a bad teacher or they get someone who is negative about the career, that can really impact how they view teaching. And it's not always rainbows and sunshine. And I'm not going to sit here and try to say that it is, because it's
Sure.
not. We have struggles just like anyone else. And a lot of those struggles have been very politicized and very much highlighted in the media lately. So I think that's having an impact on future teachers. But I really want those students right now that are considering it to realize that there are much more rewards than there are negative things to being a teacher. It is an excellent career. The pay isn't the greatest in the world, but it's not the worst in the world either. It is a very livable pay. We're fighting to get that, so maybe we'll get that placed and fixed for those future kiddos that want to be teachers. But it's rewarding because there's not one day that's the same as the day before. So if you're not someone who can sit behind a desk and do the same, push the same papers every day, teaching's a great job for that, especially working with kids with special needs. My day is never the same. Those kids have different needs every single day they walk in the classroom. And so that's unique to the career as well. I hesitate to say you get the summers off because you really kind of don't.
That's a myth.
That's just a myth. You might get a few days here and there, but you really
Urban
don't.
legend.
It is. But you can plan some things. That is one bonus, that you do have some time. And it's a wonderful career that your family is on the same schedule as you, which makes it a bonus as well. If you have the day off, your children have the day off if they're in the same school system. So there's lots of bonuses. But I think the most important thing is that you're really truly making a difference in the lives of hundreds and possibly thousands of people over your career, depending on the grade level you teach and what district you teach in. But you're making someone into another adult. You're molding them and you're teaching them what they need so they grow up to be whatever they want to be, whether it's a teacher or anything else. And I think that's just the most amazing thing. When I have future or former students contact me after years and they send me messages and say how much of a difference it made, or I had one child that I didn't know that didn't really feel like she would live to be 18 years old, and
Wow.
recently she messaged me. I'd lost track of her, and she messaged me and she's going to college, and that just blew my mind because I would have never dreamed it. And
That's
so
amazing.
those are the things that really, I think, hit home. And it's not the job for everyone. But if someone is interested in it, they should, I think, definitely reach out to maybe even their favorite teachers and ask them what they can do, even in high school. And there are a lot of programs around the state that are really working with our high school students while they're in high school to help them become the teachers they want to be someday. And we need to get those in every district. It's not there yet, but I think we need to get them there. There's programs like Ed Rising. There's teaching pathways in some of our districts.
Okay.
I'd really love to see, and I know that we have people working on this at the state level, and I'm so glad to hear it, but just to build your own pathway. We've got children and we've got to figure out a way to help them become teachers and then provide them a job right back in the districts where they started from, so that we can just keep putting people back in the classroom that are best at doing what they do. So they're not leaving. Our best teachers are sometimes leaving, and we don't want them to do that. We need them here because even when people say it's a struggle to be a teacher right now, and that they don't feel like they could tell people that they should be a teacher, I always look at them and say, but my children and my grandchildren still need to have really good teachers.
Yes.
So we've got to encourage better teachers in order to improve the whole system.
Yeah. That is a so wonderful answer. And I'm excited to hear about those programs. Do you care to share a little bit more about just some of the ones you're referring to?
Yeah, I'm not an expert about them. We don't
Okay.
have them in our area, but I know that the ones that do, and I've heard and learned a little bit more recently about them, the districts around like local colleges and universities have programs where they have kind of like partnership with that university or college,
Okay.
and they even like dual credit classes where they're already taking some college classes about
Sure.
teaching. They're working teachers in their high school are working with them to teach them to be teachers. So they take classes in high school about
Mhm.
becoming teachers. So it's really much a pathway right straight to the university, and they get credit before they even get there. And so they're already on that mindset, and they're even like doing hours and stuff in classrooms where they work in like the elementary schools, and they get time there so they can kind of start already
That's
experiencing
great.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah, we just need
Okay.
to make sure it's everywhere.
Yeah. We can work on that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That sounds really cool. Um, and then let's see, talking specifically about special education, we kind of covered this earlier, but are there any other, traits or practices that you would want a student who's up and coming in special education to be aware of, or maybe where they could just focus their learning a little bit? Do you have any guidance on that?
Sure. I would suggest learning as much as you possibly can. As we said earlier, even teachers, we're still learners, we're lifelong learners. But if there's a specific type of disability or learning difference that you're more interested in, research it. Get to know everything you can about it, because the more you understand it, the better you are experiencing it, planning for it, and helping those children. I will say that you will have a wide variety of learning differences as a special education teacher. You will deal with anything and everything you could have possibly ever dreamed of. There are different types of special ed certifications. You have what I have is I work with students with mild mental disabilities, behavior disorders, and learning disabilities across any grade level, K through 12. Then
Mhm.
there's also what we call MSD or FMD, and those are the students that are have more special needs. They may have physical needs and health needs, and their intellectual ability is lower, and so their learning differences are much different. So that's a different certification.
Sure.
I do not have that, so there are children that that may be more interested in that. I would
Okay.
suggest reaching out to those teachers in your district, asking if you can come sit in their classroom, experience it for yourself, because sometimes we think we know what we're getting into, and when we don't. So much better to know ahead of time and know which pathway you want to go. Just experience as much as you possibly can. Ask questions. You will also, as a special ed teacher, I'm not going to sit here and I'm always very straightforward. The paperwork is horrendous. It really is.
Yeah.
And I would want someone to know that if that's not something you're really interested in, then that might not be the area for you. It has changed a lot in my 22 years. We are a world that, just putting it quite frankly, is lawsuit happy. And that is something in special ed world that is very much a factor. And we have to be very careful in the things we do. We all see those horror stories on the news and stuff. I don't want people to be discouraged by that or think, oh my goodness, I don't want to be that person. It doesn't happen that way as much as what, media and stuff would like you to think it does.
Sure.
But again, the rewards are so much more. And when you see the difference in those children over the years, because a lot of times in special ed, you get to work with them for multiple years versus just 1 year. And so you really bond with those kids and you get to see the difference as they grow. And I think that's what makes it so extremely inviting and nurturing and special to work with those kids.
It's such an impactful industry. I mean, I'll just share with you a little anecdote. I'm at home, obviously, we're doing this interview virtually, but my husband and I actually bought my high school English teacher's house. And, when I think back to my teachers who influenced me the most, it was my English teacher in high school for AP English and my world civilization and English teacher in my sophomore and junior year. And I went on to become an English major in college. And, I didn't go on to teach, but I used those skills that I learned from those two teachers in interviewing, emails, creating documents. I mean, all the time I use kind of that pathway. And then when we bought my English teacher's house, it was like full circle. I really admired this person so much that I bought their house, but it was
That's awesome. I love
that it happened. So I definitely understand that teachers can influence you for a lifetime. So, and then one more question. What would you like to share with students who would like to go into education, maybe special education or just education in general? What words of wisdom do you have for them today?
Oh goodness, that's a good one.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Um, with all I've been through in the past 10 years, going, still in the classroom, but also leading outside the classroom on such a different level that I never expected, I think it's very important that teachers learn to use their voice. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. But so many of our systems have broken teachers down to where they feel like they're just that person that needs to go in every day and be in their classroom, do their job, and go home. But there's so much more than that. And so I want upcoming teachers to realize that they're not just a teacher. They're everything that you could possibly think of. And I don't want them to also think that means that they have to wear every hat. We are sometimes pressured into wearing many, many hats, and that's part of our job. But that's not who we are, that's not our profession. We should be and need to be treated as professionals. And I think as children who become teachers grow up through the system, and if they learn to find their voice in the beginning rather than allowing the system to kind of push that down and learn how to use it appropriately, then we build up more teacher leaders. And they don't have to just stay inside the four walls of their classroom. They can do like I do and so many other people across the state, and they can speak up and they can learn and they can grow and share information. It doesn't mean you're fighting the system. It means you're fighting for the system and with the system. And I think that makes the difference, is that mindset. But yeah, use their voice to speak up for what they want in faculty meetings. When they're seeing things need to be done a certain way, don't be afraid to reach out to your administrator and say, I've got this. But always go in, if you have an issue or you have something you want to change, always go in with a solution as well. And that will get you so much further than if you just go in and complain. So always remember that too, is when you walk through that door, be ready to share some solutions. Doesn't mean they'll always accept them, but be willing to share, because then they know you're willing to work on it and not just come in and complain, because that closes doors instead of opening them, and you want doors to open. Absolutely. But teaching isn't just a Monday through Friday job. It's hard work. We spend a lot of time outside the hours, and our contracts do say that we can do that. And so a lot of people get frustrated, I think, and overwhelmed in those first couple of years, because it's so much more than what they were expecting, which is why I always say it's, get out in the classrooms, be involved. When you do your hours in the classroom and when you do your student teaching, don't leave at that 3:30 bell. If your teacher stays to work on something, stay. Experience the whole experience, because that'll help you that first year so much more.
That's great advice. Thank you for that. Yeah. And I would even say that your advice of coming with the solution, that's across any job, any career that you have.
Absolutely.
You the voice of complaint and not offer up solutions or try and think outside the box and be creative. So that's wonderful. Thank you. And then just for fun, what was your first job, Allison? What did you do before you got into teaching?
It was teaching. It was teaching. It's always been teaching.
Wow.
I didn't have a summer job. I didn't have any other jobs. I went to school with my stepmom. She taught summer school, and I went with her.
Wow.
And I taught little groups of kids and did bulletin boards, and I did all that stuff.
Teaching is your destiny. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, it really was. It's really funny, but 22 years later, I finally had my first. So I'll tell you my newest job. I finally had my first summer job. And my daughter and I worked at an icy hut last summer. So I had my first teenage job as a 47-year-old woman. But it was so nice to do something. Oh, lots more than I should admit to. But it was so nice to do something that I didn't have to put, major thought into. I didn't have to write lesson plans. I could just, and I got to see people and meet new people and students that were coming up all the time. So I got to see my kiddos. So it was really fun. And we're doing it again this summer. I'm excited.
Awesome. That's so fun.
I didn't have a first job. I had a mid-year crisis, midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis job.
Yes.
That's so cool. Well, anything else that you would like to share with us? We don't have questions to go off of from our students. We'll get those later, but any other words of wisdom or anything that we may have not thought of that you'd like to share?
Just, my path is much different than most people's path. It wasn't something I went searching for. It all just kind of started, and one thing led into another. But again, it goes back to using your voice and using it for the right things, and always keep your students at the center of every decision. And I say that, but I'm also a leader for teachers, and And people say, well, but sometimes you say things and it's you're fighting for teachers and not students. But I always look at them and say, well, how do you think students are going to be successful if the teachers don't have what they need? Right. So, we have to take care of ourselves as educators. You have to do self-care. You have to fight for what's best for your kids and for you, because again, we can't be our best for our students and we can't help them succeed if we don't have the tools, both figuratively and literally, that we need to be able to do that. So it's okay. I'm very glad to be where I am. I'm very honored to have been able to do the things that I've been able to do, and to work for the State Board of Education has just been amazing. Every member on that board, you asked about mentors. I think I could list about 12 or 13 other adults on that board that have definitely been mentors for me, so many of them, and some have become absolutely amazing friends. The Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Aaron Thompson with the Council of Post-Secondary Education, and the retired teachers, Claire and Patrice and Holly and Joanne. There's just, UK president, I could list them all. I could go on all day, but they're amazing people. And it's been an absolute honor to sit at the table with them. And yesterday I was in a conference with NASB, and someone made the statement, it's good to have a seat at the table, but that seat is worthless unless you're being heard. And I can honestly say there's not been a moment in my year with a seat at that table that I didn't feel like I was being heard. I don't have a vote, but I've definitely been heard, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, as a parent, again, I truly appreciate everything you're doing to protect our kiddos and look out for their best interest. I'm just starting the education journey with my little girl, so I see how important that is every day. So thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We will take questions via email, and we will get those to you if there's any follow-up questions that you can maybe vet and give us answers on. And I really appreciate the time you've taken of being with us.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to hearing from the students. So send me lots of questions. That's my favorite thing is working with the kids. So I look forward to that.